Hi guys, welcome to Ammonia Void. This is my 18th episode. I'm still in my hometown now, sitting here in my koala suit. It's minus 11 degrees, so this is the only thing that keeps me warm here. And at the same time, I thought it's kind of thematic to the episode that we're gonna do today. I decided to do an episode on the idea of being too much. I was a bit hesitant at first, but in the end, I thought, why not? Perhaps it's something that people deal with too, And once I moved to Paris, this frames too much got literally pasted on me everywhere I go. When I show my photos, or if somebody introduces me, they refer to my photography as being like too much or too intense. And I keep repeating to myself, like, what does this phrase even mean and what does it have to do with me? So, in this episode, I would like to dive into the psychology of being too much and how it's actually good to embrace this position. This episode is literally me overthinking and overanalyzing this idea, but I still think it's important to do so because let me tell you why. So, what is too much then? It's kind of like a reactionary phrase. It's partially judgment, and at the same time, it's a differentiation from the person who claims it. And at the same time, too much has become a convenient label for anything that refuses to be easily consumed. So, something that disrupts comfort, asks for responsibility from the viewer, and it also insists on presence, instead of being on the surface level. So these are not necessarily bad things, right? So in this episode, I'm kind of interrogating why intensity, ambiguity, sensuality, politics, emotion, or refusal to behave nicely is treated as excess, while violence, exploitation, and numb browsing, scrolling are normalized. So, as a society, we constantly consume on a daily basis war footage, pornified bodies, humiliation, and we are part of this algorithm on social media that we just numbly consume whatever we are presented with. Yet at the same time, we distance ourselves from vulnerability, ambiguity, things that are not necessarily immediately clear, this desire that isn't served on a silver plate immediately, and also from images that stay in your head. So I came to this idea, listen carefully, that this phrase too much can be taken as a social control mechanism. I know it might sound very deep, but this is how my mind works. So in the end, it's what shocks me isn't the label itself, but what we tolerate instead. Because as I say, like too much often translates to too visible, too embodied, too honest, too slow, too difficult to scroll past. So it also means that when you think about this phrase, when somebody said, "Oh yeah, you are too much," it's also rather a reflection of the person who says it. It's not so much about you; it's a reaction to you. And I feel when a person says it, it's because they have some personal blocks that resurface when seeing my work or when they, I don't know, interact with me as a person. And I think that's actually a great sign because it means that my work is actually doing something to them and there's some activation going on and trigger is taking place. So too much usually doesn't mean being violent, it rather means being inconvenient. I will now dive into photography, what state we are in, and the comfort of aesthetics, because I try to talk about this a lot in this channel because I really want people to wake up about this because it's trendy, to have these, we're in this era that celebrates this clean aesthetics, visual neutrality, beautiful images that say nothing really risky. They're very passive, they can be really beautiful, but they just don't move me. They're just there. And in this way, for me, photography really becomes a kind of decoration nowadays. There is no differentiation between a photograph on the wall as an art form and a kind of a decoration object. It's part of branding, creation of content, and a semi mood board. And I find it very problematic and kind of like a crisis of photography, I'd say. That's why I try to highlight it here a lot. I'll give you an example, and this is not me ranting or like being negative, or but it's just what I notice and how what I think about it. Okay, so since I moved to Paris, I went to a lot of magazine launches because I love magazines and because there's so many magazine launches in Paris every single week. And at some point, I got really bored and sad because they all seem so literally the same. Um, and what I found really problematic was that the design is structured like Instagram feed. The text is inside is completely random. It feels like it's not even meant to be read, and it's more like a visual element to look serious as an actual publication. The editorials is I'm mostly talking about fashion magazine, let's say, and the editorials all look the same, just like pretty women in stockings being dreamy, touching their foot or touching their hair, or like people just like being a little bit lost and then in their own space. And I'm just like, I've seen this like 1 million times. At some point I was like, is this the same magazine or just a different issue? Or no, it was actually different publications. And then you have all these pretentious people attending and buying this magazine to just put it in their table, and it looks nice so they can show also other people how cultured they are. But I'm telling you, in those months, it was like two, maximum three times during these magazine launches when I actually thought like, wow, I found this magazine really interesting and I want to buy it. And in the end, most of the time it was not even photography magazines. It was like literary magazines or contemporary art magazines. Anyways, I'm not gonna throw any shade here, but it's just about like, I find it very dangerous that what was niche before is turning into mainstream, and this is also a way how we are turning or having things under control. So we think that it's something innovative, but at the same time it's just recreating an algorithmic feed on our social media, which is now turned into print. And I thought that the print is the escape from the algorithm, no? Anyways, so aesthetic photography is safe and it doesn't really ask you to respond or to react. It doesn't really implicate you. Now, on the other hand, photography that holds some kind of desire or violence without spectacle, or something that confronts power or refuses clarity, well, this type of photography usually gets censored, gets judged by people, and is categorized as dangerous. And it's because it actually threatens the established order of things. The things that are safe, the magazines that we've all seen a million times, they're not gonna do anything to you. Just because they're beautiful, you're like, oh, let me just put it here, and that's necessarily something that you keep in your mind. And that's the whole point. And you know, like platforms, institutions, and audiences then reward the stuff that can get consumed quickly and what doesn't really disturb you. And then they punish complexity and contradiction, which I find very paradoxical. It's kind of like an oxymoron, my favorite word related to my work and my existence, I think. And I will go now again deeper a little bit into this, like how being labeled too much is a form of discipline. This is where it becomes a little bit philosophical and political. Um, because this labeled too much, I barely ever see directed at men. It's mostly directed at women, queer bodies, bodies of color, or artists who don't really perform this idea of gratitude for nothing, for what. Gratitude is important, but it's also important not to perform it. I will give you an example from Oxymoron Tour. I was traveling with this book to different countries, and I loved how I could see how different cultures react to the book differently. I traveled to Sao Paulo, Paris, London, Berlin, Vienna, and Prague. And so I categorize that there's this different level of too much based on cultural background. And for a very, very long period of time, I was very hesitant to show my work back home in Czech Republic, because it's strange. Like there was almost no interest in my work here for the past 10 years that I am making photography. But now suddenly when things started happening abroad, of course there is now interest in my work. And it was funny, like to bring back my work to my home country. And there was a lot of interesting factors, because I shared the poster of an event where it's the book launch, so people actually choose to come to this event. It's their personal decision to arrive, and they know what they can expect based on my work. And in Prague, it was very interesting for me to see some reactions. Of course, majority of reaction was very, very nice and very positive, but I did see that some people opened the book and they got so confronted they had to immediately close it. Or I saw some people leaving in the middle of my speech, and I found those reactions very intriguing, because one way you can think about it as a way to shrink you or make you doubt yourself or to change yourself. But when I thought about it more, it rather became about how certain taboos are in conflict with the given culture or personal upbringing, and how they actually challenge the person in real time. So either it provokes this impulsive or performative reaction, let's say by closing the door, the book, or grandiosely leaving the space. So in this way, I came to this semi-conclusion that the reaction of being too much actually has nothing to do with you personally, but it rather is related to order of things internalized in people saying this. So too much, this phrase too much, is rarely about your work. It's about who is allowed to take space. And censorship today rarely looks like banning. It looks rather like a polite discouragement. It's like, I'm gonna close this book. I think you should stop your career, or like, I'm not gonna listen to this nonsense because it doesn't make sense to me and to my bubble, to my world. And another part of this episode I would like to dedicate it to not internalizing this voice that can emerge as a reaction when people label you as too much. Because this is something that happened to me, because I kept hearing like, oh, Linda is too much, her work is too much. It's something that it has an impact on you. It's hard to block it. You learn how to block it, but in the beginning, I'm sure everybody who heard this, they start hearing this voice in their heads. So in the beginning, it might start as like, maybe I should tone it down a little bit, or maybe I should be more digestible for people. And this is actually how artists begin to pre-censor themselves, kind of anticipate rejection, and also dilute their instincts. And you can see like how in photography, this can be more precisely like choosing which image will perform well on social media, or which image will sell on an exhibition. So you kind of edit out certain work out of discomfort, and you start producing work that feels empty but approved. And this is a massive shame, because you are actually betraying yourself and your work, and this is something that you definitely want to avoid as an artist. So now we go more to the resistance part, how you can stay with some kind of intensity. You know, so Susan Sontag, in her writings, she warned that constant exposure to images, especially violent or extreme ones, doesn't make us more sensitive. It actually makes us numb. So shock kind of loses its power, but paradoxically, society still reacts strongly to certain kinds of intensity. So here's the contradiction. We live in a culture that can endlessly digest violence, but can tolerate someone being fully present in their desire, their rage, or their grief. To me, it doesn't make sense at all. And in photography, violence is acceptable when it's as this word, you know what I mean, aestheticized, yes, aestheticized, distant or documentary. But intimacy, excess, or ambiguity makes people uncomfortable because it requires participation and not necessarily consumption. Um, there was another author, Byung-Chul Han. He is the author of The Burnout Society, and he describes how contemporary culture is obsessed with smoothness, with this frictionless, positive, and transparent way of being, that nothing should really resist and nothing should hurt too much. So it's also similar to this numbness that Susan Sontag is explaining. So what it means is that we've replaced meaning with smoothness. So images don't need to say anything, they just need to feel good enough to not disturb us. And that is, of course, so problematic. We don't want that. You know, like as an artist, I feel this pressure to produce endlessly, to stay visible, to stay positive. So being too much suddenly becomes dangerous as it disrupts the flow, it disrupts the order of things. Um, so why does saturation make us numb to violence but hyper reactive to vulnerability? Who benefits when artists censor themselves? And is being too much sometimes just refusing to produce predictable images? I let these questions sit with you, and asking myself these questions, I'm telling you, I overthink this topic a lot. Um, but I thought, like, you know, I'm no longer interested in being digestible. I'm interested in being honest, in staying true to myself, in saying what I think. And if that's too much for people, then, well, I'm sorry. Not sorry. Sorry, not sorry, because I'm just gonna continue to be like that. And so this brings me to the takeaways of today's episode. Number one, too much is rarely about excess. It's more about discomfort. So being labeled too much usually means your work goes against easy consumption. In a culture trained to scroll, that demand feels really threatening. Number two, what we call too much reveals what society refuses to face. What I mean by that is that, how I said, we tolerate this endless violence spectacle, and we avoid real feelings. And the label of too much doesn't really expose the artwork, but it exposes the limits of the viewer's comfort. So make sure that when you hear this, you think about, oh, this has nothing to do with me. This is more about the person who is saying this. Number three, in photography, safety has become an aesthetic. And I think there's kind of like an explosion of this right now, really. I don't know if this is AI or if this is post-COVID thing, but please, please stop this. You know, these clean, neutral, beautiful images are rewarded because they don't disturb. So I really encourage people to like push it, you know, and they will feel resistance, but it's so good. Just push it, go against the flow, and see what feels good for you, not to copy what's been done a million times. I think number four now. Too much is a form of discipline. So this phrase, disproportionately, is directed at women, at queer bodies, at racialized artists, and this is just unfair. Like, why? why? Why am I being too much for you? Because I just exist. it's not really a critique then, it's just about a boundary, being enforced upon you to differentiate you from the other. So just try to like brush it off. Number 5, internalizing the label is where the real danger begins. That's why I recommend you to brush it off real early, because when you actually start taking action within your art, like censoring yourself or producing work that can be easily approved, your work will become empty, and that's very sad because that's how your intensity as an artist is being slowly erased. And I forgot, this is I think 6. I always forget to count the numbers. Maybe next time I will just continue without the counting. Um, Resistance means staying with intensity. So, it's just a position of refusing this numbness, refusing the smoothness. Um, if the work unsettles people, it demands participation, which is a good thing. And this is what images still can do and what they actually should do. And the last one is, um, the question in the end is not am I too much, but rather who benefits if I become less? I would like to leave you with this question. You can repeat it for yourself, you can think about it. And I highly, highly encourage you in my koala suit and on this moving chair to be as much as you want. And we all can be too much together, because that's the best. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I will continue my day as a koala, and I see you soon.